This is not just a story about a maniac. This is a story about a system that was so desperate to maintain the illusion of a perfect society that it destroyed the lives of 14 innocent men to protect that lie. This is the story of the Vitebsk Strangler and the one honest detective who finally brought him down. The year is 1971. The location is the Vitebsk region of the Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, a quiet, peaceful area known for its beautiful forests and hardworking people. In the Soviet Union, the official doctrine was clear. Serial killers were a capitalist disease. They simply did not exist in a socialist paradise. Crime was supposed to be fading away. But in the forest near Vitebsk, something dark was waking up. It started with a disappearance, then a terrible discovery near the Polotsk highway. A young woman, her life cut short, left in a ditch. The local militia was alarmed, but they treated it as an isolated incident. A robbery gone wrong, perhaps, or a jealous lover. But then it happened again and again. Panic began to spread through the region like a virus. Women stopped walking alone in the evenings. Factory shifts were reorganized so that female workers could be escorted home. The atmosphere in Vitebsk changed from tranquility to terror. The people demanded answers. The party demanded results. And in the middle of this chaos, there was a man named Gennady. If you looked at Gennady, you saw the perfect Soviet citizen. He was charming, polite, and intelligent. He had a good job at a repair shop. He was a loving father and a devoted husband. He was a member of the Communist Party, a man who paid his dues and attended meetings. He even owned a car, a red Zaporozhets, which was a rare luxury in the 1970s, a symbol of status and success. But Gennady was more than just a model citizen. He was a druzhnik, a member of the Volunteer People's Guard. In the Soviet Union, these were civilians who wore red armbands and helped the police patrol the streets, maintain order, and look for criminals. Gennady was very enthusiastic about his duties. When the bodies started appearing, he was on the front lines. He volunteered for extra shifts. He drove his red car alongside police cruisers, scanning the roads for the killer. He sat in briefings with investigators, listening to their theories, nodding thoughtfully, and even offering suggestions on where the maniac might strike next. The police trusted him. Why wouldn't they? He was one of them. What they didn't know was that the red Zaporozhets they saw patrolling the highways was the same car the victims saw in their final moments. They didn't realize that the man helping them draw maps of the crime scenes was the only man who knew exactly where the next body would be found. And in the middle of this chaos, there was a man named Gennady. If you looked at Gennady, you saw the perfect Soviet citizen. He was charming, polite, and intelligent. He had a good job at a repair shop. He was a loving father and a devoted husband. He was a member of the Communist Party, a man who paid his dues and attended meetings. He even owned a car, a red Zaporozhets, which was a rare luxury in the 1970s, a symbol of status and success. But Gennady was more than just a model citizen. He was a druzhnik, a member of the Volunteer People's Guard. In the Soviet Union, these were civilians who wore red armbands and helped the police patrol the streets, maintain order, and look for criminals. Gennady was very enthusiastic about his duties. When the bodies started appearing, he was on the front lines. He volunteered for extra shifts. He drove his red car alongside police cruisers, scanning the roads for the killer. He sat in briefings with investigators, listening to their theories, nodding thoughtfully, and even offering suggestions on where the maniac might strike next. The police trusted him. Why wouldn't they? He was one of them. What they didn't know was that the red Zaporozhets they saw patrolling the highways was the same car the victims saw in their final moments. They didn't realize that the man helping them draw maps of the crime scenes was the only man who knew exactly where the next body would be found. Ignatovich was an investigator for particularly important cases. He was a different breed of detective. He wasn't interested in politics or quotas. He was a man of logic, a man who looked at facts, not convenient narratives. When Ignatovich arrived in Vitebsk, he did something no one else had done. He looked at all the cases together. He laid out the files of the closed cases, the men currently in prison, and the fresh crime scenes. He saw the pattern immediately. The modus operandi was identical. The locations, the timing, the method, it was all the work of one man, a single predator who had been operating for over a decade. Ignatovich realized the terrifying truth. The Vitebsk Strangler was still free, and all those men in prison were innocent. It was a dangerous realization. To prove this theory meant proving that the entire local police force, the prosecutors and the judges were incompetent criminals who had sent innocent people to their deaths. Ignatovich was going against the system itself. He needed proof, irrefutable proof. And then Gennady made a mistake. For years, Gennady had felt invincible. He watched the police chase shadows while he stood right next to them, but he was getting arrogant. He wanted recognition. He wanted to taunt them. He wrote a handwritten letter. He signed it, "The Patriots of Vitebsk." In the letter, he claimed that the murders were not the work of a maniac, but a political act by a group of patriots punishing loose women. He placed this letter in the mouth of one of his victims. He thought this would confuse the police even more, sending them chasing after a non-existent political underground. But for Ignatovich, this letter was the golden key. He now had a sample of the killer's handwriting. Ignatovich knew the killer was a local man. He knew he was likely an intelligent man, someone who could write well. He came up with a plan that sounded insane to his superiors. He decided to check the handwriting of every single man in the Vitebsk region. It was called the Great Graphology Experiment. It was an operation of unprecedented scale. Investigators went to factories, offices, and collective farms. They asked men to write short essays, fill out forms, or write explanations for minor infractions. They gathered thousands of documents. Then they gathered military records, passport applications, and job applications. In total, they collected over 556,000 handwriting samples. Imagine the scene: rooms filled from floor to ceiling with paper. Dozens of experts working day and night, comparing the loops of the letter P and the slant of the letter K from the killer's note against 500,000 innocent scribbles. It was searching for a needle in a haystack the size of a city. But science is patient. One day an expert picked up a standard form, an explanation note written by a worker at a repair shop regarding a minor violation. The expert froze. The handwriting was distinctive, the sharp angles, the specific pressure on the paper. He placed it next to the Patriots of Vitebsk letter. It was a perfect match. The name on the form was Gennady Mikasevich, the model citizen, the communist, the Druzhinik. Ignatovich didn't rush. He knew that if he arrested a hero like Gennady without absolute proof, the system would crush the investigation to save face. He needed to be sure. They put Gennady under surveillance. They watched him drive his red Zaporozhets. They watched him kiss his wife goodbye. They watched him put on his red armband and go to the police station to help. They finally moved in to arrest him. They stopped his car on a quiet road. Gennady was calm. He thought it was a misunderstanding, or perhaps he was being stopped for a minor traffic violation. He even tried to bribe the officers, thinking he was caught stealing spare parts from work. But when they put the handcuffs on him and mentioned the murders, his face changed. The mask of the friendly volunteer dropped, revealing the cold, empty eyes of a monster. In the trunk of his car, and later in his home, they found the trophies, items belonging to the victims, things he had kept for years, things he had sometimes given to his own wife as gifts. The interrogation was chilling. Gennady didn't cry. He didn't beg for mercy. He spoke about his crimes with the dry, factual tone of a man discussing a grocery list. He confessed to 36 murders. He told them how he used his red car to lure women in, how he used his police ID to gain their trust, how he would commit a crime and then return to the scene an hour later with the police squad to investigate, sometimes even stepping over the footprints he had just left. The trial of Gennady Mikasevich in 1987 was a sensation. But it was a quiet sensation. The Soviet press was careful. They reported the crimes, but they tried to downplay the fact that he was a volunteer policeman. However, the consequences were seismic. Gennady was sentenced to death. He was executed by firing squad. His reign of terror was finally over. But for Ignatovich, the job wasn't finished. The arrest of the real killer exposed the rot in the justice system. Because of Ignatovich's work, the innocent men who were still alive in prison were released. They returned to their families, broken, aged, and scarred, but free. The officials who had tortured them, the prosecutors who had ignored the evidence, and the judges who had sentenced them. Many were fired, stripped of their ranks, and some were even prosecuted. It was a massive purge of the Belarusian justice system. The story of the Vitebsk Strangler is a dark chapter in history. It reminds us that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it smiles at you. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it offers you a ride home in a red car. But it also reminds us that the truth has a way of surfacing. It took 14 years, 556,000 sheets of paper, and the determination of one man who refused to look away. Gennady thought he was the system. He thought he was untouchable, but in the end, he was just a name on a piece of paper, waiting to be found.